Hi, welcome to this seminar session. Here's our agenda. First, some reminders about things coming up. Second, now that we've introduced the idea of discourse communities, we want to flesh out exactly what we mean by the concept. Finally, we're going to look ahead to make sure we know what we're doing next. Our first check-in is to anticipate that you might be getting a bit confused about why we're talking about discourse communities for our first assignment and for our blog posts. Even though we'll be explaining what a discourse community is in more detail later in this seminar, the short answer is that you'll be using the concept for both of these assignments. For your blog posts, you're going to choose a community that is part of your personal interests and activities. For the DCA assignment, you'll be choosing a community that is directly linked to your program. So let's talk about your first blog post. First, it's due on Sunday, May 30th, which is at the very end of week 2. By this time, you'll have chosen a personal activity or interest to blog about. And for this first post, we're asking you to introduce this community to a general audience. Here's the question we're asking, which you can also find with the blog assignment sheet. And now for the discourse community assignment. Here are the due dates for the rough draft and the final version. I'll mark your rough draft out of 5% and give you feedback. The final draft is worth 15% of your grade. You'll need to use a minimum of 2 sources for this. The John Swales article, which we'll be discussing in just a minute, and one other source. An option is that you can conduct an interview with someone from the discourse community that is your topic. Now, let's talk about this concept of a discourse community. According to linguist John Swales, a discourse community is any group of people that shares 6 characteristics. First, they agree on common public goals. That's easy. Your teachers, for instance, share the goal of helping you learn and prepare for a career. A group of hockey players has a different set of aims: to score goals, to win games, advance in the standings. Second, a discourse community has mechanisms of intercommunication, which is just a fancy way of saying that they have different ways of communicating amongst themselves. A community might use texting, email, or video conferencing. A hockey team might use verbal cues or hand signals in the middle of a play. Third, these mechanisms of intercommunication are used to provide information and feedback. This is just an extension of the second characteristic, because most communication in a community takes place in the context of responding and providing feedback. Number 4 talks about genres of communication, but the main purpose here is to highlight different types of written forms: reports, blog posts, emails, and so on. Number 5 is about the vocabulary that members of a discourse community use amongst themselves. Another word we can use here is jargon. Whether you are talking cyclists, police officers, or nurses, each group has a special vocabulary for insiders that can be difficult for outsiders to understand. Finally, a discourse community has both novices and experts. New people coming into the community are novices, and ideally over time they become experts. A community needs a balance of both to survive over time. Let's look at some recreational examples of discourse communities. Here we have a chart that uses the 6 characteristics to look at a hockey team on the left and a community of online gamers on the right. You can pause the video at this point if you like to get a sense of how each of the characteristics outlined by John Swales can be seen in either of these very different communities. You might also find this chart helps you to think of a discourse community that you'd like to blog about this term. Let's switch now to a couple of vocational examples. This chart shows how two very different occupations, plumbers on the left and police officers on the right, can also be examined as discourse communities. You are also welcome to pause the video here if you choose, so that you can see how each occupation can be understood as a discourse community. And by the way, this might be helpful to you in terms of your discourse community analysis, because we're asking you to choose a community in the field you are currently working towards. So, what are your next steps in terms of the DCA assignment? First, make that decision about the community that will be your focus. Second, you might want to start doing research, searching for career profiles related to the community that you've chosen. Third, as you research, focus on anything related to on-the-job communication. In other words, the 6 characteristics that Swales talks about. Thanks for checking out this seminar. Make sure that you don't forget to complete the self-directed learning for week 2, and also to complete your first blog post.